Hey star-crossed souls, ready to risk everything for a love no law can allow. Welcome to the world where ancient pack laws run deeper than blood, where one stolen glance can ignite a war, and where two hearts must choose between duty and desire. Tonight, under the crimson glow of the blood moon, witness a love so forbidden it could shatter centuries of tradition, or forge a destiny that defies every rule. Some loves are meant to be hidden in the shadows, but can they survive the light? Chapter 1. The border between the Nightfall Pack and the Crimson Moon Pack had been drawn in blood centuries ago, marked by ancient stone cairns and the ghosts of countless battles. Luna Blackthorne stood at the edge of her territory, her silver-blue eyes scanning the dense forest that stretched into enemy lands. The autumn wind carried whispers of danger, and the intoxicating scent of pine mixed with something else, something that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. "You shouldn't be here alone," came a voice behind her. Luna turned to see Marcus, her beta and childhood friend, approaching with concern etched across his weathered features. "The Crimson Moon Wolves have been testing our borders more frequently. Your father would have my hide if something happened to you." Luna's jaw tightened at the mention of Alpha Blackthorne. "I'm perfectly capable of handling myself, Marcus. Besides, someone needs to patrol these lands. The pack elders spend so much time in their war councils, they've forgotten what the actual forest looks like." She turned back toward the invisible line that divided their world from their sworn enemies. For 300 years, the Blackthorns and the Ashfords had shed blood over this territory. The feud had started with a betrayal so deep, so cutting, that it had poisoned generations. Luna's great-great-grandfather had trusted his closest friend, Alexander Ashford, with his life, only to have that trust repaid with treachery and death. Since then, any Blackthorn caught on Ashford land faced exile or worse, and any Ashford who dared cross into Nightfall territory would be killed on sight. A twig snapped somewhere in the distance. Luna's head whipped toward the sound, her enhanced senses immediately on high alert. The wind shifted, and with it came a scent that made her heart race and her wolf howl with recognition. It was wild and earthy, like storm clouds and midnight rain, with an underlying warmth that called to something primal deep within her soul. "Enemy," her mind whispered. "Ashford." But her body betrayed her with a different response entirely. "Luna?" Marcus stepped closer, his hand moving instinctively to the silver dagger at his belt. "What is it?" "Someone's out there," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to call for backup, to follow the protocols that had been drilled into her since childhood. Instead, she found herself taking a step forward, drawn by an invisible thread she couldn't name. The underbrush parted, and a figure emerged from the shadows of the Crimson Moon territory. Luna's breath caught in her throat as she laid eyes on the most magnificent wolf shifter she'd ever seen. He was tall and powerfully built, with dark hair that caught the fading sunlight and eyes the color of amber honey. But it was the way he moved, with liquid grace and predatory confidence, that made her pulse quicken. Their gazes locked across the forbidden divide, and Luna felt the world tilt on its axis. Recognition flared between them, not of faces, but of something far deeper. Her wolf whimpered and pressed against her consciousness, yearning to shift, to run to him, to claim what felt devastatingly like
mate. No.
The thought slammed into her like a physical blow. It was impossible. The moon goddess wouldn't be so cruel as to bind her to an Ashford. Not when her entire life had been built around hating his kind. Not when her father's greatest fear was that she might show mercy to their enemies. The stranger's nostrils flared as he caught her scent, and she watched his entire body go rigid. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, his carefully controlled facade cracked, revealing a hunger that made her knees weak. "Luna," Marcus hissed, his voice sharp with alarm. "We need to leave.
Now."
But neither she nor the mysterious Ashford moved. They stood frozen in a moment that felt suspended outside of time, drinking in the sight of each other like they were dying of thirst. Luna memorized every detail of his face, the strong line of his jaw, The way his brow furrowed with what looked like pain, the slight upturn of his lips that suggested he might smile easily under different circumstances. Finally, the sound of approaching voices from deeper within Crimson Moon territory broke the spell. The stranger's eyes widened with what might have been regret, and he took a step backward. "Until we meet again," he said softly, his voice carrying across the distance between them like a caress. Then he melted back into the forest as silently as he'd appeared, leaving Luna staring at empty air and wondering if she'd imagined the entire encounter. "Luna!" Marcus grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "What in the moon's name was that about? You just stood there staring at a Crimson Moon wolf like what?" she asked, though her voice sounded strange even to her own ears. "Like he was your mate," Marcus finished, his words heavy with accusation and disbelief. Luna's blood ran cold. If Marcus had sensed it, others would too. And in a world where pack loyalty meant everything, where the mere suggestion of sympathy for their enemies was considered treason, even the whisper of such a connection could destroy everything she'd ever known. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, forcing steel into her voice even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "He's an Ashford. I was simply assessing the threat." But as they turned to head back toward Packlands, Luna couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to understand. The stranger's amber eyes haunted her thoughts, and his words echoed in her mind. "Until we meet again." Deep in her bones, she knew that he was right. They would meet again. The moon goddess had already set their fate in motion, and all the ancient laws and bloodline hatred in the world might not be enough to stop what had been awakened in that single, electric moment. Some loves were indeed meant to be hidden in the shadows. But Luna was beginning to suspect that some loves were powerful enough to survive even the harsh light of truth. The question was, would she be brave enough to find out? Chapter 2. 3 days passed, and Luna found herself returning to the border every evening, drawn by a compulsion she couldn't name. She told herself it was duty, that someone needed to monitor Crimson Moon activity along their territory line. But the truth was far more dangerous than any patrol mission. She was looking for him. The stranger with amber eyes had invaded her thoughts, turning her disciplined mind into chaos. She'd catch herself staring out windows during pack meetings, her father's voice fading to background noise as she replayed their brief encounter. Sleep had become elusive. Her dreams were filled with storm-colored eyes and the intoxicating scent of rain and wild earth. "You've been distracted lately," Sarah Blackthorne observed as Luna picked at her dinner. Luna's younger sister had always been too perceptive for her own good, her green eyes missing nothing. "Father's been asking questions." Luna forced herself to take a bite of venison, though it tasted like ash in her mouth. "I've been thinking about the upcoming Hunt Moon ceremonies. There's a lot to prepare." It wasn't entirely a lie. The Hunt Moon was only 2 weeks away, a sacred time when unmated wolves would run together under the full moon, seeking their destined partners. At 24, Luna was considered past prime mating age by pack standards. The elders whispered that she was too particular, too focused on her duties as the alpha's heir to properly consider the suitors who'd been presented to her over the years. If only they knew the truth. If only they knew that she'd finally found her mate, and he was everything they'd taught her to hate. Speaking of the Hunt Moon, Alpha Blackthorne's deep voice cut through her thoughts. Her father stood in the doorway of their family's dining hall, his imposing presence filling the room. Even at 55, he remained a formidable wolf, his dark hair only lightly touched with silver at the temples. "I've arranged for you to run with Jonathan Steele." Luna's fork clattered against her plate. Jonathan Steele was the son of a powerful allied pack, a strong warrior who'd make a politically advantageous match. He was also about as appealing to her as a dead fish, with cold eyes and a cruel smile that never quite reached them. "Father, I don't think." "It's decided," he said, his alpha authority brooking no argument. "The alliance between our packs needs to be strengthened, and it's past time you took a mate. Jonathan is a good choice. Strong bloodline, proven fighter, and his pack controls strategic territory along the northern border." "What about what I want?" The words slipped out before Luna could stop them. earning her a sharp look from her father and a warning glance from Sarah. Alpha Blackthorne's expression hardened. What you want is irrelevant. Your duty is to this pack, Luna. Every decision you make affects not just yourself, but every wolf under our protection. I won't have my heir acting like some lovesick pup when there are lives at stake. The irony of his words wasn't lost on her. If he only knew how accurate his assessment was, how completely she'd lost her mind over a wolf she couldn't have, shouldn't want, and definitely couldn't trust. Of course, father, she said quietly, hating herself for the compliance in her voice. I understand my responsibilities. But later that night, as the rest of the pack settled in for sleep, Luna found herself, once again, walking toward the forbidden border. The quarter moon provided just enough light to navigate the familiar forest paths, and her wolf's enhanced vision made the darkness seem like twilight. She moved silently, her years of training serving her well as she avoided the patrol routes she knew by heart. She was almost to the border when she caught a scent again, that devastating combination of storm and earth that made her blood sing. Her steps quickened, and she emerged from the tree line to find him waiting for her in the small clearing where they'd first seen each other. He looked even more magnificent in the moonlight, his dark hair appearing almost black, his amber eyes seeming to glow with inner fire. He'd been pacing, she realized, wearing a path in the fallen leaves. When he spotted her, he went perfectly still. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said, his voice low and rough with emotion. I wasn't sure I would either, Luna admitted, staying carefully on her side of the invisible line that divided their territories. I don't even know your name. Kieran, he said simply. Kieran Ashford. The name hit her like a physical blow. Ashford. She'd known it, of course, but hearing it confirmed made the impossibility of their situation even more real. I'm Luna Blackthorne, he finished. I know who you are. The Alpha's daughter. The heir to everything I'm supposed to hate. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their family names hanging between them like a death sentence. Luna should leave. Should run back to Pack lands and forget this madness before it went any further. Instead, she found herself taking a step closer to the border. This is insane, she whispered. Completely, Kieran agreed, moving closer as well. I've spent 3 days trying to convince myself, I imagined it, that the mate bond couldn't possibly exist between us. But you're here. But I'm here, he confirmed, his eyes never leaving her face. Just like you are. The mate bond. They were actually saying it out loud now, acknowledging the truth that could destroy both their lives. Luna's hands trembled as the full implications hit her. If they were discovered, it wouldn't just mean exile or death for them. Their packs would go to war over this perceived betrayal. Blood would flow on both sides, innocent wolves would die, and it would all be because she couldn't stay away from the one person in the world she was forbidden to love. We can't do this, she said, even as every cell in her body screamed in protest at the thought of walking away. I know, Kieran replied, his voice heavy with the same conflict she felt. Believe me, I know exactly what this would mean. My grandfather died in the last border war with your pack. My father still carries scars from fighting your uncle 15 years ago. Then why are you here? He was quiet for so long that Luna wondered if he would answer at all. When he finally spoke, his words were barely above a whisper. Because for the first time in my life, I've found something worth risking everything for. The admission hung in the air between them, dangerous and beautiful and terrifying. Luna felt tears prick at her eyes as the impossible choice loomed before her, duty to her pack, or the call of her soul. My father wants me to mate with Jonathan Steele during the hunt moon, she found herself saying. A political alliance. Kieran's jaw clenched, and she caught the flash of his canines as his wolf pressed close to the surface. I've heard of him. Cold bastard with a reputation for cruelty. You can't be jealous, Luna said, though her heart leaped at the possessive edge in his voice. We're not. We can't be anything to each other. Tell that to my wolf, Kieran said grimly. He's been going insane at the thought of another male touching you. I've barely been able to keep from shifting and hunting Steele down like the prey he is. The raw honesty in his words made Luna's knees weak. She'd never experienced anything like this consuming need, this sense of belonging to someone so completely that the thought of being with anyone else felt like a betrayal of her very soul. "What are we going to do?" she asked helplessly. Kieran looked at her for a long moment, and she could practically see the war raging behind his amber eyes. Finally, he stepped closer to the border, close enough that only a few feet separated them. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I can't stay away from you. Even knowing what it could cost us both. This could start a war. I know. We could both be exiled. Or worse. I know. Then you're as crazy as I am." For the first time since she'd known him, Kieran smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face and made her heart skip several beats. "Absolutely insane," he agreed. "But Luna, I've never felt anything like this before. Have you?" She thought of all the suitable males who'd been presented to her over the years, all the arranged meetings and formal courtships that had left her feeling nothing but polite indifference. Then she looked at Kieran, this enemy who made her feel more alive than she'd ever been, and knew her answer. "Never," she whispered. Something shifted in his expression, a decision being made that they both knew would change everything. Slowly, deliberately, Kieran stepped across the border into Nightfall territory. Luna's breath caught as he approached her, his movements careful and deliberate, giving her every opportunity to retreat. She didn't move. When he was close enough to touch, Kieran raised his hand to her face, his fingertips ghosting across her cheek with reverent gentleness. Luna's eyes fluttered closed at the contact, and she leaned into his touch like a flower seeking sunlight. "This is the point of no return," he said softly. "If we do this, if we acknowledge what's between us, there's no going back to pretending it doesn't exist." Luna opened her eyes and met his gaze, seeing her own fears and desperate hope reflected there. "I know." And then his mouth was on hers, and the world exploded into sensation. The kiss was everything she dreamed of and nothing she could have imagined, desperate and tender, claiming and surrendering all at once. Her wolf sang with recognition and joy, finally touching her other half after a lifetime of searching. They broke apart breathing hard, their foreheads pressed together as they tried to process what had just happened between them. Luna's lips still tingled from his kiss, and she could taste the wild storm flavor of him on her tongue. "Luna," Kieran breathed, and her name sounded like a prayer on his lips. A howl echoed through the forest, distant but getting closer. Luna jerked back, reality crashing down on her like a cold wave. That was Marcus's voice, leading a patrol in their direction. "I have to go," she said urgently, already backing toward the tree line. Kieran nodded, his face grim with understanding. "Tomorrow night?" She knew she should say no. Should end this before it destroyed them both. But looking at him, at her mate, her impossible, forbidden mate, she found herself nodding. Tomorrow night. As she disappeared into the forest, Luna could hear the patrol getting closer. She had maybe 3 minutes to get far enough away from the border to avoid suspicion. But as she ran through the moonlit woods, Kieran's kiss burned on her lips like a brand, and she knew that no matter what tomorrow brought, she was already lost. Behind her, the sound of another howl echoed through the night, this one from Crimson Moon territory. It was wild and mournful and achingly beautiful, the song of a wolf calling to his mate. Luna's own wolf answered before she could stop herself, her voice joining his in a harmony that spoke of recognition, of longing, of a love that defied every law their world had ever known. Some secrets, she realized, were too big to stay hidden forever. And some loves were too powerful to be denied, no matter the cost. The question now was, how long could they keep this impossible secret before their worlds came crashing down around them? Chapter 3. Luna barely made it back to her quarters before Marcus found her. She was still breathing hard from her run through the forest, her lips swollen from Kieran's kiss, and her scent undoubtedly carrying traces of the forbidden encounter. She'd splashed cold water on her face and changed into a nightgown, but there was no hiding the wild look in her eyes or the way her hands trembled as she braided her hair. "Luna?" Marcus's voice came through her door, accompanied by a soft knock. The patrol picked up strange scents near the eastern border. "Are you all right?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm fine, Marcus. Just tired. We can discuss patrol reports in the morning." There was a pause, and she could practically feel him weighing her words, searching for the lie hidden within them. Marcus had known her since childhood. He could read her moods better than anyone except perhaps Sarah. If anyone would suspect what she was hiding, it would be him. "Good night, then," he said finally, but she caught the uncertainty in his voice. Luna pressed her back against the door and closed her eyes, fighting the urge to touch her lips where Kieran's mouth had claimed hers. The kiss replayed in her mind on an endless loop, the desperate hunger in his amber eyes, the way his hands had trembled as he touched her face, the rightness of being in his arms despite everything that made it wrong. This has to stop, she told herself firmly. Before someone gets hurt. Before someone dies. But even as she thought it, she knew she was lying to herself. She would meet him tomorrow night, and the night after that, and every night until they were discovered or the world ended. The mate bond had sunk its claws too deep. There was no escape now. A soft tap at her window made her jump. Luna's breath caught as she saw a familiar silhouette perched on the wide ledge outside her second-story room. Sarah balanced there with supernatural grace, her red hair gleaming in the moonlight. "Let me in," her sister mouthed, and Luna had no choice but to unlatch the window. Sarah slipped inside with fluid movements, landing silently on the wooden floor. At 19, she was already showing signs of the exceptional tracker abilities that ran in certain bloodlines. Her senses were almost as sharp as an alpha's, and right now, she was studying Luna with the focused intensity of a predator scenting prey. "You smell like pine trees," Sarah said without preamble. "And rain. And something else I can't identify, but it's definitely male." Luna's blood turned to ice. "I was patrolling the eastern border. You know how the scents carry near the river." "Bullshit." Sarah moved closer, her nostrils flaring delicately. "This isn't residual scent from a patrol. This is fresh. Intimate. Someone touched you tonight, Luna. Someone held you." There was no point in denying it. Sarah's abilities were too refined, and Luna had never been a good liar anyway. But she could misdirect, could make her sister think it was someone else entirely. "You can't tell, Father," Luna said quietly, allowing desperation to creep into her voice. "Please, Sarah. I need time to figure this out." Sarah's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained sharp with curiosity. "Who is it? Someone from the pack? One of the visiting warriors?" Luna turned toward the window, unable to meet her sister's gaze. "I can't tell you that. Can't or won't. Does it matter?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Luna could feel her weighing the implications. Finally, her sister sighed and moved to sit on the edge of the bed. "You're playing with fire, Luna. Whatever this is, whoever he is, Father will find out eventually. He always does. And if this interferes with the Steel Alliance." "I know the risks," Luna said, though the words felt hollow.
Did she really?
Did she understand what she was risking not just for herself, but for every wolf in the pack? For Sarah, who would bear the consequences of Luna's choices. "Do you love him?" Sarah asked quietly. The question hit Luna like a physical blow.
Love.
She'd known Kieran for less than a week, had spent maybe an hour total in his presence. How could she love someone she barely knew? But even as she tried to rationalize it away, Luna knew the truth. What she felt for Kieran went beyond logic or reason. It was primal, inescapable, written into the very fabric of her soul. Whether it was love or something even more dangerous, she couldn't say. But she would die before she gave it up. "Yes," she whispered, the admission barely audible. Sarah closed her eyes, and for a moment, she looked far older than her 19 years. "Oh, Luna, what have you done?" Before Luna could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Both sisters froze as Alpha Blackthorne's voice carried through the door. "Marcus, I want doubled patrols along the eastern border starting tomorrow. Something has the Crimson Moon wolves stirred up and I don't like it." "Yes, sir." "Should I inform Luna?" "She's been monitoring that sector personally." No need. I'm reassigning her to interior duties for the next week. She needs to focus on preparing for the Hunt Moon ceremony anyway. Jonathan Steele arrives in 5 days. Luna felt the walls closing in around her. Interior duties meant no access to the borders, no way to meet Kieran, no way to explain why she wouldn't be there. He would wait for her, she knew. He would stand in that moonlit clearing wondering if she'd abandoned him, if she'd chosen duty over the bond that connected them. The footsteps receded down the hallway, but the damage was done. Sarah looked at Luna with a mixture of sympathy and fear. 5 days until Steele arrives, Sarah said softly. Whatever you're planning, whatever you think you can salvage from this situation, you're running out of time. I know. Luna. Sarah hesitated, then reached out to squeeze her sister's hand. I won't tell Father. Not yet. But you need to end this before it destroys everything we've built. Before it destroys you. After Sarah left, Luna stood at her window staring out toward the forest that separated her from Kieran. Tomorrow night, he would wait for her and she wouldn't come. He would think she'd changed her mind, that she'd chosen her pack over their bond. The thought of him standing alone in that clearing, believing she'd abandoned him, was almost more than she could bear. Chapter 4. For 3 agonizing days, Luna was trapped in pack lands like a caged wolf. Her father had assigned her to inventory duties, meeting preparations, and ceremonial planning, all tasks that kept her firmly away from the borders and under constant supervision. She went through the motions of her duties, but her mind was in constant turmoil, wondering if Kieran was still waiting for her, if he thought she'd betrayed him. The worst part was the dreams. Every night, her sleeping mind conjured vivid images of amber eyes and storm-scented kisses. She would wake gasping, her body aching with need, only to remember that she was trapped by duty and expectation, unable to go to the one person who could ease the burning in her soul. On the 3rd evening, as she sat through another tedious meeting about security arrangements for Jonathan Steele's arrival, Luna felt like she was suffocating. The walls of the meeting hall seemed to press in around her, and the voices of the pack elders faded to meaningless noise. She needed air, needed space, needed... Luna? Her father's sharp voice cut through her distraction. I asked for your opinion on the ceremonial arrangements. Of course, she said quickly, though she had no idea what they'd been discussing. Whatever you think is best, Father. Alpha Blackthorne's eyes narrowed slightly, and Luna realized her mistake too late. She never deferred so completely to others' opinions, never backed down from offering her own ideas. Her uncharacteristic compliance was as suspicious as outright rebellion would have been. Meeting adjourned. Her father said abruptly, Luna, stay behind. The other pack members filed out, leaving father and daughter alone in the suddenly oppressive silence of the meeting hall. Alpha Blackthorne studied her with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey, and Luna fought to keep her expression neutral. You've been distracted lately, he said finally. Distracted and evasive. I want to know why. I've been focused on my duties. Don't lie to me. His alpha authority pressed against her, making her wolf whimper in submission. I've been your father for 24 years, Luna. I know when you're hiding something. Luna's mind raced, searching for a plausible explanation that wouldn't lead to questions she couldn't answer. I'm nervous about the Hunt Moon ceremony. About mating with Steele.
It's a big step.
It wasn't entirely a lie. The thought of being bonded to anyone other than Kieran made her physically ill. But her father's expression suggested he wasn't buying her explanation. Jonathan Steele is a good match, he said slowly. Strong, politically connected, capable of providing the stability our pack needs. But if you have genuine concerns about his character, we can discuss alternatives. For a moment, hope flared in Luna's chest. If she could convince her father to call off the arranged mating, she would have more time to figure out how to be with Kieran without starting a war. But then reality crashed back down on her. There were no alternatives that would solve her real problem. No suitable mate her father would approve of, who could compete with the pull she felt toward her forbidden love. No, she said quietly.
Steele is fine.
I'm just adjusting to the idea of no longer being free to make my own choices. Alpha Blackthorne's expression softened slightly, and for a moment, She saw not the pack leader, but simply a father who worried about his daughter's happiness. Luna, I know this isn't easy, but sometimes our personal desires have to come second to the greater good. Your mating with Steel will strengthen both our packs, provide security for our people. That's worth any personal sacrifice. Personal sacrifice. If only he knew what he was really asking her to give up. I understand, she said, hating herself for the lie. Good. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Luna? I've arranged for additional security during your evening walks. Marcus will be accompanying you from now on, just to be safe. Luna's heart sank. Even if she could slip away from Packlands, she would never be able to lose Marcus. He was too good a tracker, too dedicated to his duty. Her father had effectively put her under house arrest, without actually saying the words. That night, Luna lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her body thrumming with restless energy. Somewhere out there, Kieran was waiting for her. Or maybe he'd given up, decided she wasn't worth the risk after all. The thought made her chest tight with panic. She was still awake when a small pebble hit her window. Luna bolted upright, hope flaring in her chest, but when she looked out, she saw only Sarah's familiar silhouette on the ledge. Let me in, her sister whispered urgently. Luna opened the window, and Sarah slipped inside with her usual grace. But tonight, there was something different about her sister's expression, a mixture of excitement and fear that made Luna's pulse quicken. I found him, Sarah said without preamble. Found who? Your mystery male. The one whose scent has been driving you crazy. Sarah's green eyes were bright with discovery. I've been tracking the scent traces you've been carrying, following them back to their source. Luna, he's been coming to the border every night, waiting for you. Luna's breath caught. Sarah, you shouldn't have. He's beautiful, her sister continued, as if Luna hadn't spoken. Powerful. I can see why you're attracted to him. But Luna. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. He's Crimson Moon. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Luna closed her eyes, knowing that her secret was finally out, that everything was about to come crashing down around her. How long have you known? She asked quietly. I suspected after I caught his scent on you. But I had to be sure before I said anything. I followed the trail tonight, saw him waiting in that clearing where the territories meet. Sarah moved closer, her voice urgent. Luna, do you have any idea what this means? If Father finds out. He won't find out, Luna said fiercely. Because it's over. I can't see him again, anyway. Father has me under constant supervision. Is it over? Sarah asked softly. Because he looked like a wolf dying of starvation out there. And you look like you haven't slept or eaten properly in days. Luna turned away from her sister's too perceptive gaze. It has to be over. You said it yourself, if Father finds out, it will destroy everything. What if there was a way? The quiet question made Luna whip around. What do you mean? Sarah took a deep breath, and Luna could see her sister wrestling with a decision. What if I could get you to him? Just once more. To explain why you can't come. To say goodbye properly? Sarah, no. I won't let you risk. I'm already risking everything by keeping your secret, Sarah pointed out. At least this way, you get some closure. And maybe you can convince him to let you go. Luna stared at her sister, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You would do that for me? You're my sister. And despite everything, despite how impossible this is, you deserve a chance to follow your heart, even if it's just once. Tears burned Luna's eyes as she looked at Sarah. Beautiful, loyal Sarah who was willing to risk her own safety for Luna's happiness. If we're caught. We won't be caught, Sarah said with quiet confidence. I'm the best tracker in the pack, remember? I know every patrol route, every guard position. I can get you there and back without anyone knowing you were gone. Luna's heart hammered against her ribs as she considered the offer. One more night with Kieran. One chance to explain, to say goodbye properly, to hold him in her arms before duty tore them apart forever. It was dangerous, reckless. If they were discovered, both sisters would face exile or death. But the alternative, living the rest of her life wondering what might have been, bonded to a male she didn't love while her true mate thought she'd abandoned him, seemed infinitely worse. When, she whispered. Sarah smiled, and for the first time in days, Luna felt a flicker of hope. Tomorrow night. Jonathan Steele arrives the day after that, so this is your last chance. I'll create a distraction, draw the guards away from the eastern quarter. You'll have maybe 2 hours before they notice you're gone. 2 hours. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. Enough to explain to Kieran why she couldn't be with him, enough to memorize every detail of his face before she said goodbye forever. Thank you, Luna said, her voice thick with emotion. Don't thank me yet, Sarah replied grimly. If this goes wrong, we're both dead. And if it goes right, you still have to mate with Steele and pretend your heart isn't breaking. Luna nodded, understanding the weight of what her sister was offering. Tomorrow night would be her last taste of freedom, her final chance to be with the one person who made her feel truly alive. After that, she would belong to duty, to the pack, to a future that felt like a slow death. But for 2 precious hours, she would be free to love the enemy who had claimed her soul. Some chances were worth any risk. Some loves were worth any price. And Luna was about to discover just how much she was willing to sacrifice for one last night with the male who held her heart.
Chapter 5.
The plan was set into motion just after midnight. Sarah had spent the day carefully observing patrol patterns and guard rotations, mapping out the precise window of opportunity they would need. As the pack settled into sleep, she made her move. Luna heard the commotion from her room, shouting voices, the sound of running feet, Marcus bellowing orders. Through her window, she could see torches bobbing through the forest as search parties spread out in all directions. Fire in the grain stores, someone shouted. All hands to the northern quarter. Sarah appeared at Luna's window moments later, her face streaked with soot and her eyes bright with adrenaline. That should keep them busy for at least an hour, she said breathlessly as Luna let her in. I may have accidentally knocked over a lantern while checking the storage rooms. Sarah, you didn't. Relax. It's just one small building, mostly empty anyway. But it'll take them time to put it out and make sure it doesn't spread. Sarah grabbed Luna's cloak from the wardrobe. We need to go.
Now.
Luna's heart hammered as they slipped from her room and made their way through the pack house's shadowy corridors. The main areas were deserted, everyone having rushed to help with the fire emergency. Sarah led them through a side entrance that opened onto the kitchen gardens, then along a path that would take them to the forest's edge. Stay low and follow my lead, Sarah whispered. I've mapped out a route that avoids all the remaining patrol points. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, Sarah's tracker instincts guiding them safely around the scattered guards who hadn't been pulled away by the emergency. Luna's wolf senses were on high alert, her body thrumming with nervous energy as they drew closer to the border. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, they reached the familiar clearing where Luna had first encountered Kieran. The space was empty, silvered by moonlight, and for a terrifying moment, Luna thought he hadn't come. Then a figure emerged from the tree line on the crimson moon side, and Luna's breath caught in her throat. Kieran looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept in days. His dark hair was disheveled, his clothes rumpled, and there was a desperate hunger in his amber eyes that made her chest tight with guilt. He'd been coming here every night, waiting for her, not knowing why she'd stopped appearing. Luna, he breathed, and her name sounded like a prayer of relief and anguish. She started toward him, but Sarah caught her arm. I'll keep watch, her sister said quietly. You have maybe 90 minutes before they realize you're gone. Don't waste a second of it. Luna nodded gratefully, then ran across the clearing toward the male who held her heart. Kieran met her halfway, catching her in his arms and spinning her around as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. I thought you'd changed your mind, he said roughly, his face buried in her hair. I thought you decided I wasn't worth the risk. Never, Luna whispered, clinging to him with desperate intensity. My father has me under constant guard. I couldn't get away until tonight. Kieran pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face with reverent gentleness. You're here now. That's all that matters. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and achingly tender, as if she were something precious he was afraid to break. Luna melted into him, her body singing with relief and joy at being back in his arms where she belonged. When they broke apart, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. "I've been going insane without you. My wolf, he's been fighting me constantly, demanding I storm your territory and claim you properly." "I know the feeling," Luna admitted. "I've barely slept, barely eaten. Everything feels wrong when we're apart." "Then don't leave again," Kieran said urgently. "Come with me tonight. We can disappear, find somewhere far from both our packs where we can be together." The temptation in his words was almost overwhelming. To run away with him, to abandon duty and responsibility and live only for love, it was everything her heart wanted. But Luna knew better than anyone what that choice would cost. "They hunt us down," she said sadly. "Both our packs would come after us. And in their anger, they'd probably go to war with each other. Innocent wolves would die because of our selfishness." "Then, what's the alternative?" Kieran asked, though she could see in his eyes that he already knew the answer. Luna took a shaky breath, steeling herself for the words that would shatter both their hearts. "Jonathan Steele arrives tomorrow. The Hunt Moon ceremony is in 4 days. My father expects me to mate with him and cement the alliance between our packs." Kieran went rigid in her arms, his hands tightening reflexively on her waist.
"No."
"Luna, you can't." "I have to," she said, hating herself for the pain she saw flashing across his face. "My pack is depending on this alliance. My sister, my friends, everyone I've ever cared about will be safer because of this political bond." "What about what we have?" Kieran demanded, his voice raw with anguish. "What about the mate bond? You can't just ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist." "I'm not pretending anything," Luna said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "This is killing me, Kieran. The thought of another man's hands on me, of bearing children who aren't yours, it feels like death. But sometimes love means sacrifice. Sometimes protecting the people we care about matters more than our own happiness." Kieran stared at her for a long moment, and she watched him struggle with the impossible reality of their situation. Finally, his shoulders sagged in defeat. "There has to be another way," he said desperately. "Some solution we haven't thought of." "If there is, I can't see it," Luna admitted. "The feud between our families goes back too far. There's too much blood, too much hatred. Even if we revealed the mate bond, they'd more likely see it as a curse than a blessing." They stood in silence for a moment, holding each other as the weight of their impossible situation settled over them like a shroud. Luna memorized the feel of his arms around her, the sound of his heartbeat against her ear, the storm and earth scent that had become as necessary to her as breathing. "For days," Kieran said finally. "We have 4 days before you bind yourself to another." Luna pulled back to look at him, seeing something dangerous flickering in his amber eyes. "Kieran, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that if this is all the time we have, I'm not wasting a second of it on despair." His hands moved to cup her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. "I'm thinking that I want to give you something to remember when you're lying in another man's arms. Something that will remind you that you belong to me, mate bond or no mate bond." Heat flared through Luna at the possessive edge in his voice. Her wolf whimpered with need, pressing against her consciousness and demanding she submit to her true mate's claim. Every instinct screamed at her to say yes, to take whatever he was offering and worry about the consequences later. "We can't," she whispered, though the protest was weak even to her own ears. "Can't we?" Kieran's mouth moved to her throat, pressing soft kisses along the sensitive skin there. "You're already promised to another. What difference does it make if you come to him pure or claimed?" "Every difference," Luna gasped, though she tilted her head to give him better access to her neck. "If Steele discovers I'm not a virgin, let me worry about Steele." Kieran growled against her skin. "Tonight, there's only us. Only this." His teeth grazed her pulse point, and Luna's knees went weak. She could feel her resolve crumbling, undermined by weeks of longing and the intoxicating pull of the mate bond. This was her last chance to be with the male who owned her soul. After the ceremony, She would belong to duty and politics and a loveless bond. But tonight, she could belong to love. Luna? Sarah's voice carried across the clearing, tense with urgency. Someone's coming. Eastern Patrol, maybe 5 minutes out. The spell broke, reality crashing back down on them like a cold wave. Kieran cursed under his breath and pulled away from Luna, though she could see the struggle in his expression. "Meet me tomorrow night," he said urgently. "Same time, same place. If we only have 4 days, I'm not wasting them." "Kieran, promise me," he demanded, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Promise me you'll come." Luna looked into his eyes and saw her own desperate need reflected there. Tomorrow, Steele would arrive. The day after that, the ceremonial preparations would begin. She was running out of time to be herself, to be free, to be with the one person who made her feel truly alive. "I promise," she whispered. Kieran kissed her once more, quick and hard and desperate, then released her and melted back into the forest shadows. Luna stood frozen for a moment, her lips tingling from his kiss, before Sarah grabbed her arm. "We have to go.
Now."
They ran through the darkness, retracing their path back to Pack lands. Behind them, Luna could hear the approaching patrol, their voices growing closer. They made it to the Pack house just as the first searchers emerged from the forest, slipping through the kitchen gardens and up to Luna's room with seconds to spare. "The fire?" Luna asked breathlessly as they collapsed onto her bed. "Contained," Sarah reported, though she looked as shaken as Luna felt. "They'll probably spend the rest of the night making sure it doesn't flare up again." Luna nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere, already counting the hours until she could see Kieran again. Tomorrow night would bring new risks, new chances for discovery. But she'd made him a promise, and more than that, she'd made herself one. If she only had 4 days of freedom left, she was going to make them count. Chapter 6. Jonathan Steele arrived with the dawn, his convoy of vehicles kicking up dust clouds as they approached the Nightfall Pack's main compound. Luna watched from her bedroom window as her future husband stepped out of a black SUV, every movement radiating the kind of cold confidence that made her skin crawl. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, tall and lean with perfectly styled blonde hair and steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. Everything about him was controlled, calculated, from his expensive clothes to his practiced smile. When he turned to speak to one of his accompanying warriors, Luna caught a glimpse of the cruelty that lurked beneath his polished exterior. "Your future mate has arrived," Sarah said from behind her, though there was no enthusiasm in her voice. Luna forced herself to step away from the window. "I should go greet him. Father will expect it." "Luna." Sarah caught her arm as she headed toward the door. "Are you sure about tonight? It's going to be so much harder to slip away with Steele here. He'll want to spend time with you, and Father will be watching every interaction." The thought of spending the evening making small talk with Jonathan Steele while her body ached for Kieran's touch made Luna feel physically ill. But she'd made a promise, and after tomorrow night, there would be no more chances. "I have to see him," Luna said quietly. "One more time." Sarah nodded reluctantly, understanding flickering in her green eyes. "Then I'll make it happen. But this has to be the last time, Luna. The risks are getting too high." Luna made her way downstairs to the main hall, where her father was already greeting their guests with a formal courtesy, due to important allies. Alpha Blackthorne looked every inch the powerful leader in his ceremonial clothes, his dark hair gleaming and his presence commanding the room's attention. Luna," he said as she approached. "Come meet your future mate." Jonathan Steele turned toward her with a smile that never reached his eyes. He was even more imposing up close, with the kind of predatory grace that spoke of a wolf used to taking whatever he wanted. When he took her hand to kiss it in the traditional greeting, his lips lingered a moment too long, his grip just slightly too tight. "Lady Luna," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "You're even more beautiful than I'd heard. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better." "The pleasure is mutual," Luna replied, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "Perhaps you could show Jonathan around the territory this afternoon," Alpha Blackthorne suggested. "Give you both a chance to become better acquainted before the ceremony." Luna's stomach clenched at the thought of spending hours alone with Steele, but She nodded graciously. Of course, father. The afternoon was torture. Jonathan Steele was charming in a cold, calculating way, making all the right responses to her attempts at conversation, while his eyes catalogued her like a prize he was evaluating. He spoke of politics and pack alliances with a casual confidence of someone accustomed to power, but there was an underlying current of possessiveness in everything he said that made Luna's skin crawl. You'll enjoy living in our territory, he said as they walked along one of the forest paths. My pack controls some of the finest hunting grounds in the region. And of course, as my mate, you'll want for nothing. I'm sure it's lovely, Luna managed, though the thought of leaving her home, her family, her sister, to live among strangers felt like a death sentence. Your father tells me you've been involved in pack security, Steele continued. That's admirable, of course, but once we're mated, you'll have other priorities. Children, household management, supporting my political career. Important work for a female of your breeding. The casual dismissal of everything she'd worked for, everything she'd accomplished, made Luna's wolf snarl with rage. But she kept her expression neutral, knowing that any sign of defiance would only make things worse. Naturally, she said through gritted teeth. By the time they returned to the pack house, Luna felt like she was suffocating. The walls seemed to press in around her, and Jonathan's cold presence felt like a weight on her soul. She made her excuses as soon as she could, claiming she needed to prepare for the evening meal. But instead of going to her room, Luna found herself seeking out the small garden behind the pack house, a quiet space where she could breathe and try to collect herself before facing another evening of Steele's company. She was sitting on a stone bench, trying to calm her racing heart, when Marcus found her. You look like you're about to bolt, he observed, settling beside her with the easy familiarity of their old friendship. That obvious? Luna asked weakly. To someone who's known you since you were 5 years old?
Yeah.
Marcus studied her with those two perceptive eyes. Luna, if you're having second thoughts about this mating... It's not about second thoughts, Luna interrupted. It's about duty. About doing what's best for the pack. Is it? Marcus asked quietly. Or is it about something else entirely? Luna's blood ran cold. What do you mean? I've been watching you these past few weeks. The way you've been distracted, restless. The way you've been disappearing for long walks and coming back smelling like... He paused, and Luna held her breath. Like pine and rain and something I can't identify, but that makes my wolf uneasy. Marcus. I don't know what's going on, Luna. But whatever it is, whoever he is, you need to end it before it destroys everything you've worked for. Before it destroys you. Luna stared at her oldest friend, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes alongside something that looked like suspicion. How much did he know? How much had he guessed? There's nothing to end, she said carefully. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze searching her face. Finally, he sighed. I hope that's true. Because Jonathan Steele isn't the kind of male who would forgive infidelity. And your father. Luna, if he discovered you'd been seeing someone else, someone inappropriate, the consequences would be severe. I understand my obligations, Luna said stiffly. Do you? Marcus stood, his expression grave. Because tomorrow is the pre-ceremony rituals, and the day after that is the hunt moon. After that, you'll belong to Steele completely. Whatever fantasies you might be harboring about other possibilities, other choices, they need to end now. After he left, Luna sat in the garden as shadows lengthened around her. Marcus's words echoed in her mind, mixing with the memory of Steele's cold possessiveness and her father's expectations. The walls were closing in from all directions, and she was running out of time. But tonight, she would have one more stolen moment with Kieran. One more chance to feel truly alive before duty claimed her forever. The question was, would she be strong enough to say goodbye when morning came? As the sun set and the pack house settled into evening routines, Luna began planning her escape. Sarah would help her, as she had before. They would find a way to evade the increased security, to slip past Jonathan Steele's watchful presence. Because some promises were too important to break. And some loves were too powerful to abandon without one final dance in the moonlight. Even if that dance was destined to be their last. Chapter 7. Getting away from Packlands proved even more difficult than Luna had anticipated. Jonathan Steele seemed determined to monopolize her attention, lingering after dinner for what he called courtship conversations that felt more like interrogations. His questions probed deeper than mere politeness warranted, as if he was cataloging every detail of her life for future reference. "You seem distracted tonight," he observed, those steel-gray eyes studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "Are you nervous about the ceremony?" "Perhaps a little," Luna admitted, which was the truth, though not in the way he imagined. "Understandable. It's a significant step, binding yourself to a male you barely know." His smile held no warmth. "But I'm sure we'll grow comfortable with each other quickly enough. I find that wolves adapt well to new circumstances when properly motivated." The way he said "properly motivated" made Luna's skin crawl, but she managed to keep her expression neutral. "I'm sure we will." It was nearly midnight before Steele finally retired to his guest quarters, and even then, Luna had to wait another hour to ensure he was truly asleep. When she finally slipped from her room, Sarah was waiting in the hallway with barely contained anxiety. "This is madness," her sister whispered as they crept through the darkened corridors. "Steele's presence has everyone on high alert. There are twice as many guards as usual." "Did you find a way?" Luna asked desperately. Sarah nodded reluctantly. "The same distraction as before won't work twice. But I noticed that the guards are focused on external threats. They're not expecting trouble from within. If we're careful, we can slip out through the old root cellar exit. It'll put us closer to the eastern border, but we'll have to cross 2 patrol routes." They made their way to the lowest level of the pack house, where ancient stone walls and forgotten passages spoke of the building's original defensive purposes. The root cellar exit hadn't been used in decades, its heavy wooden door swollen with moisture and age. "It's going to take both of us to move this," Sarah murmured, putting her shoulder against the stubborn barrier. They pushed together, muscles straining against decades of disuse, until finally the door gave way with a groan that seemed impossibly loud in the midnight silence. Luna held her breath, waiting for shouts of alarm, but none came. The tunnel beyond was narrow and damp, barely wide enough for one person. They crawled through on hands and knees, the rough stones scraping against their clothes, until they emerged behind a screen of overgrown bushes at the forest's edge. "From here, we stay low and move fast," Sarah instructed. "First patrol route is in about 200 yards. I'll signal when it's clear." They moved through the darkness like hunting wolves, every sense alert for danger. Sarah's tracker abilities proved invaluable as she guided them around patrol patterns and guard positions with uncanny precision. Still, Luna's heart hammered against her ribs with each step, knowing that discovery would mean not just her own ruin, but Sarah's as well. When they finally reached the border clearing, Kieran was already there, pacing with the restless energy of a caged predator. The moment he spotted Luna, his entire body went still, amber eyes drinking in the sight of her as if he'd been starving for days. "I wasn't sure you'd be able to get away," he said as she ran to him. "Neither was I," Luna admitted, throwing herself into his arms with desperate relief. He held her tight, his face buried in her hair, breathing in her scent like it was life itself. "Your new mate has arrived," he said, and she could hear the carefully controlled fury in his voice. "You know about Steele? Word travels fast between our territories. My pack is interested in the alliance your father is forging." Kieran's hands tightened on her waist. "They're calling it a strategic victory for the Nightfall Pack." "If only they knew the cost," Luna whispered. Kieran pulled back to look at her, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with heartbreaking tenderness. "Luna, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Something in his tone made her stomach clench with dread. "What is it?" "If there was a way for us to be together, truly together, without hiding, without shame, would you take it? Even if it meant giving up everything you've ever known?" "Kieran, we've been through this. There is no way." "But if there was," he pressed. "If I could offer you a future where you didn't have to choose between love and duty, would you want it?" Luna stared into his amber eyes, seeing something she couldn't identify flickering in their depths. Hope? Desperation? Or something more dangerous? You're scaring me, she said quietly. Answer the question. Please. Luna's heart clenched as she considered what he was really asking. To abandon her family, her pack, everything she'd ever been taught to value. It should have been impossible to even contemplate. But looking at Kieran, feeling the rightness of being in his arms, she knew her answer without hesitation. Yes, she whispered. If there was really a way, if we could be together without destroying innocent lives in the process, then yes. I'd give up everything for you. Something shifted in Kieran's expression, relief mixed with what looked like painful determination. Then trust me, he said simply. Trust you to do what? Instead of answering, he kissed her with a passion that stole her breath and scattered her thoughts. His hands tangled in her hair, holding her against him as if he could make her a permanent part of himself through sheer will alone. I love you, he said against her lips, the words soft but fierce with conviction. Whatever happens after tonight, I need you to remember that. I love you more than life, more than honor, more than anything else in this world. Tears spilled down Luna's cheeks as the finality in his voice hit her. Kieran, what are you planning? What aren't you telling me? I'm telling you that I won't let you sacrifice yourself for a political alliance, he said with quiet intensity. I'm telling you that some loves are worth fighting for, worth risking everything to protect. You can't fight an entire pack system, Luna said desperately. You can't change centuries of hatred with good intentions. Maybe not, but I can try. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. Luna, what if I told you that our mate bond might be more than just personal? What if it could be the key to healing the rift between our packs? I'd say you were dreaming, she replied, though something in his words made her pulse quicken with unwanted hope. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, Kieran said softly. She doesn't bond wolves across enemy lines without reason. What if she's trying to tell us something? What if our love is meant to bridge the gap our ancestors created? Luna wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to the possibility that their impossible situation might have a solution. But she'd lived with the reality of pack politics her entire life, had seen firsthand how deep the hatred ran. Even if you're right, even if there's some grand purpose to all this, how do we convince two packs that want nothing more than to destroy each other? We start by refusing to be pawns in their game, Kieran said with fierce determination. We start by choosing love over hate, hope over fear. And if we're wrong, if this destroys everything instead of healing it, then at least we'll go down fighting for something real, something pure. At least we'll know we tried to build something better instead of just accepting the world as it is. His words stirred something deep in Luna's chest, a wild hope she'd been afraid to acknowledge. What if he was right? What if their mate bond was more than just cruel cosmic irony? What if it was actually meant to be the solution rather than the problem? What are you asking of me? She whispered. I'm asking you to run away with me tomorrow night, Kieran said simply. Before the ceremony, before you bind yourself to steel forever. I'm asking you to trust that love is stronger than hate, that hope is more powerful than fear. My father will never forgive me. My pack will see it as the ultimate betrayal. Maybe. Or maybe they'll see it as the bravest thing you've ever done. Kieran's voice was soft but urgent. Luna, I can't watch you mate with another male. I can't pretend to accept a world where political alliances matter more than true love. If you won't run with me, then I'm going to do something desperate, something that might get us both killed, but at least gives us a fighting chance. Alarm flared through her. What do you mean? Kieran, what are you planning? Before he could answer, the sound of approaching voices echoed through the forest. Sarah's warning whistle cut through the night air. 3 sharp notes that meant immediate danger. Go, Kieran said urgently, releasing her despite the obvious pain it caused him. Before they find you here. Tomorrow night, Luna said desperately as she backed toward the tree line. Whatever you're planning, don't do anything until tomorrow night. Promise me. I promise, he said, but something in his eyes suggested he was making a different vow than the one she'd asked for. As Luna disappeared into the shadows, following Sarah's lead back toward Pack lands, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Kieran's words echoed in her mind. His talk of fighting for love, of refusing to be pawns, of doing something desperate. What was he planning? And would she be brave enough to join him when the moment came? Chapter 8. Luna barely made it back to her room before dawn. She and Sarah had been forced to take a circuitous route back to avoid the search parties that seemed to be combing the forest with unusual intensity. By the time they crawled back through the root cellar entrance, both sisters were exhausted and covered in mud. "Something's wrong," Sarah whispered as they cleaned themselves up in Luna's bathroom. There were too many guards out there, too much activity for a routine patrol. Luna nodded, her stomach clenching with unease. "Do you think they know we were gone?" "I don't know. But we need to be extra careful today. Act completely normal, no matter what happens." Normal? Luna almost laughed at the impossibility of that directive. How was she supposed to act normal when her world was falling apart, when the male she loved was planning something desperate, when her unwanted mating ceremony was only 24 hours away? She was still trying to figure out how to survive the day when a sharp knock at her door made both sisters freeze. "Luna?" Alpha Blackthorne's voice carried the unmistakable edge of barely controlled fury. "I need to see you. Now." Luna's blood turned to ice. Sarah grabbed her arm, eyes wide with panic, but there was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Whatever her father had discovered, they were about to face the consequences. "Coming, father," Luna called, proud of how steady her voice sounded despite the terror clawing at her chest. She opened the door to find Alpha Blackthorne standing in the hallway with Marcus at his side. Both males wore expressions of grim determination that made Luna's wolf whimper in submission. "We need to talk," her father said curtly. "Privately." "Of course." Luna stepped into the hallway, pulling her door closed behind her to keep Sarah out of whatever storm was about to break. Alpha Blackthorne led her to his private study, a room that had always felt like a sanctuary, but now seemed more like a trap. Marcus followed, closing the door with an ominous finality that made Luna's heart race. "Sit," her father commanded, gesturing to the chair across from his massive oak desk. Luna perched on the edge of the seat, every muscle tense with the anticipation of doom. Alpha Blackthorne settled behind his desk like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict, while Marcus remained standing near the door, blocking the only exit. "Last night," her father began, his voice deadly quiet, "there was unusual activity along our eastern border. Scents that didn't belong, disturbances that suggested clandestine meetings." Luna's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact. "I wouldn't know anything about that, father. I was in my room all night. Were you?" Alpha Blackthorne leaned forward, his dark eyes boring into hers. "Because Marcus has some interesting observations to share." Luna's gaze flicked to her oldest friend, seeing the regret and determination warring in his expression. "Marcus." "I'm sorry, Luna," he said quietly, "but I can't stay silent anymore. The sense I've been detecting on you, the way you've been acting, I've been tracking you. Last night, I followed the trail to the eastern border." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Luna realized the full scope of her exposure. "You followed me?" "I had to know what was going on," Marcus said, his voice heavy with pain. "I had to know if my suspicions were correct." "And what did you find?" Alpha Blackthorne asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength for what he was about to say. "She's been meeting with a Crimson Moon Wolf. A male. They're involved." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Luna felt all the blood drain from her face as her father's expression shifted from anger to something far more dangerous. Cold, calculating fury. "Is this true?" Alpha Blackthorne asked, his voice so quiet it was barely above a whisper. Luna's mind raced, searching for some explanation, some way to minimize the damage. But there was no point in lying now. The truth was out, and all she could do was try to protect the people she loved from the consequences. "Yes," she said simply. "How long?" 2 weeks. 2 weeks, her father repeated, each word dripping with disgust. 2 weeks you've been sneaking around behind my back, consorting with our enemies, betraying everything this pack stands for." "Father," I can explain. Explain? Alpha Blackthorne's voice cracked like a whip. Explain how my own daughter, my heir, has been whoring herself to an Ashford? The crude words hit Luna like a physical blow, but she forced herself not to flinch. It's not like that. We haven't.
I'm not.
Then what is it like? He demanded, rising from his chair with predatory grace. Tell me, Luna. Help me understand how you could betray your family, your pack, your birthright for some enemy male. Luna lifted her chin, finding courage in the face of his fury. He's my mate. The silence that followed was deafening. Alpha Blackthorne went perfectly still, his face draining of color as the implications hit him. Your mate, he repeated slowly. The moon goddess chose him for me. I felt the bond the moment I saw him, and so did he. Father, you have to understand. I understand perfectly, Alpha Blackthorne said, his voice now deadly calm. I understand that my daughter is either lying to justify her betrayal, or the moon goddess has a twisted sense of humor. I'm not lying, Luna said desperately. Ask Marcus. He can verify the mate scent if he's been tracking me. Marcus nodded reluctantly when Alpha Blackthorne's gaze swung to him. The scent markers are consistent with a mate bond, he admitted. But that doesn't change what this means for the pack. No, it doesn't, Alpha Blackthorne agreed. He moved around the desk to stand directly in front of Luna, his presence overwhelming. Tell me his name. Luna's heart hammered against her ribs. Revealing Kieran's identity would put him in immediate danger. Both packs would hunt him as the seducer who'd corrupted the Nightfall heir. I won't tell you that, she said quietly. Her father's hand moved so fast she barely saw it coming. The slap echoed through the study, Luna's cheek burning as her head snapped to the side. But she didn't cry out, didn't let him see how much it hurt. You will tell me, Alpha Blackthorne said with icy certainty. You will tell me everything about this male, about your meetings, about what you've done together. And then you will help me end this before it destroys both our packs. Luna straightened in her chair, meeting her father's furious gaze with quiet defiance.
No.
I won't. Then you leave me no choice. Alpha Blackthorne returned to his desk, pulling out a sheet of official pack stationery. As of this moment, you are confined to your quarters under guard. You will not leave this compound, will not communicate with anyone outside the pack, will not so much as breathe without my permission. He began writing, his pen scratching across the paper with violent strokes. The mating ceremony with Jonathan Steele will proceed as scheduled tomorrow night. After that, you will be his responsibility, and he can deal with your indiscretions as he sees fit. You can't force me to mate with him, Luna said, though she could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. Can't I? Alpha Blackthorne looked up from his writing, and Luna saw no mercy in his expression. You are my daughter, my heir, and you will do your duty to this pack. This foolishness ends now. And if I refuse? If I won't participate in the ceremony? Then you will be formally exiled, her father said without hesitation. Stripped of your name, your title, your place in this pack. You will become nothing, a rogue wolf with no protection, no family, no future. The threat hit Luna harder than any physical blow could have. To be exiled meant losing everything, not just her father and her position, but Sarah, her friends, her entire identity. Rogues rarely survived long without pack protection, and those who did lived miserable, lonely existences. But even as the fear clawed at her chest, Luna found herself thinking of Kieran's words from the night before. Some loves are worth fighting for, worth risking everything to protect. Then exile me, she said quietly. Alpha Blackthorne's pen stilled on the paper. What did you say? I said exile me, Luna repeated, her voice growing stronger. Strip away my title, my name, everything you think I should value. I won't mate with Jonathan Steele. I won't pretend to love a male who makes my skin crawl while my true mate exists in the world. Luna, Marcus said urgently, you don't know what you're saying. Think about Sarah, about everyone who depends on you. I am thinking about them, Luna interrupted, rising from her chair with newfound determination. I'm thinking that maybe it's time someone in this family chose love over politics. Maybe it's time someone refused to be a pawn in these endless games of power and hatred. Alpha Blackthorne stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. You would throw away everything for some Ashford mail? You would destroy the alliance with the Steel Pack, endanger our security, betray your sister's future? I would choose my mate over your machinations, Luna said simply. And maybe, just maybe, I would show both our packs that there's another way to live. A way that doesn't require sacrificing happiness for politics. Her father was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her with an expression she couldn't read. Finally, he set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. Very well, he said calmly. If that's your choice, then so be it. But understand this, Luna. Once you walk out that door, you are no longer my daughter. You are nothing to me, nothing to this pack. And when your precious mate's pack learns what you've done, when they realize you've brought shame on both bloodlines, they'll likely kill him to cleanse the dishonor you've created. The words hit Luna like a physical blow, but she forced herself not to show weakness. That's a risk I'll have to take. Is it? Alpha Blackthorne smiled coldly. Because I don't think you're quite as ready to sacrifice innocent lives as you claim. Guards. The study door opened, and two of the pack's strongest warriors entered. Luna recognized them both, wolves who had served her family loyally for years, who looked at her now with disappointment and pity. Escort my former daughter from the premises, Alpha Blackthorne commanded. She is no longer welcome on Nightfall territory. If she returns, she is to be treated as any other trespasser, with lethal force if necessary. As the guards moved toward her, Luna felt the full weight of what she was losing crash down on her. Her home, her family, her identity, all of it gone in the space of a heartbeat. But underneath the grief and terror, she felt something else, a fierce, wild joy at the thought of being free to choose her own destiny. Tell Sarah I love her, she said quietly as the guards flanked her. Tell her I'm sorry, but I had to follow my heart. Alpha Blackthorne didn't respond, didn't even look at her as she was escorted from the room. But in the hallway, Marcus caught her arm, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Luna, please, he whispered urgently. It's not too late. You can still change your mind, still come back from this. Luna looked at her oldest friend, loyal, protective Marcus, who'd tried so hard to save her from herself, and felt her heart break a little more. I can't, she said simply, but thank you for caring enough to try. And then she was walking through the halls of her childhood home for the last time, past rooms full of memories and toward a future that held nothing but uncertainty and the promise of love that might not be enough to survive what was coming. Some choices, she realized, changed everything. Some loves demanded everything. The question now is whether she and Kieran would be strong enough to build something beautiful from the ashes of everything they'd destroyed. Chapter 9. Luna's exile was swift and merciless. She was given 10 minutes to gather her belongings under armed guard, forbidden from saying goodbye to anyone, and escorted to the territory border before the sun had fully risen. The guards who'd known her since childhood refused to meet her eyes as they watched her cross into the neutral lands that belonged to no pack. She carried only a small backpack with basic supplies and the clothes on her back. Everything else, her weapons, her ceremonial garb, her identification papers that marked her as Nightfall nobility, had been confiscated. She was now truly nothing, a rogue wolf with no protection beyond her own abilities. The first few hours were the hardest. Luna found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, expecting to see the familiar trees of her home territory, forgetting that she could never return. Every instinct screamed at her to go back, to beg her father's forgiveness, to accept the life that had been planned for her rather than face the terrifying uncertainty of exile. But whenever her resolve wavered, she thought of Kieran waiting for her in their clearing, and her feet carried her forward toward whatever future they could build together. The neutral lands were harsh and unforgiving, populated by rogues, outcasts, and dangerous predators that had been driven from civilized territory. Luna kept to the main paths when possible, but even those offered little safety. She was approached twice by groups of rogue males who saw a lone female as easy prey, and only her superior training and the desperate strength of someone with nothing left to lose kept her safe. By nightfall, she was exhausted, hungry, and more alone than she'd ever been in her life. She made camp in a small cave she found tucked into a rocky outcropping, building a tiny fire and rationing the meager food she'd been able to pack. As darkness settled around her, the full weight of what she'd given up finally hit her. Sarah would wake tomorrow to find her sister gone, exiled in disgrace. The hunt moon ceremony would proceed with Jonathan still left without a bride, potentially damaging crucial pack alliances. Her father would be forced to deal with the political fallout of his heir's defection, and the shame would follow their family for generations. All for a male she'd known for 2 weeks. All for a love that might not survive the harsh realities of life as outcasts. What have I done? Luna thought desperately as tears streamed down her cheeks. What if Kieran can't find me? What if he doesn't come at all? The doubts circled like vultures, pecking at her resolve until she was curled up in a miserable ball, questioning every choice that had led her to this moment. Maybe her father was right. Maybe she was a foolish girl who'd thrown away everything meaningful for a fantasy that could never survive in the real world. She was still lost in self-recrimination when she heard footsteps approaching her cave. Luna scrambled to her feet, grabbing the hunting knife that was her only remaining weapon, and pressed herself against the stone wall. The footsteps were careful, measured, not the stumbling approach of a drunk rogue, but the purposeful stride of someone tracking prey. Luna? The voice that called her name was achingly familiar, rough with exhaustion and desperation. Luna, are you in there? Her knife clattered to the ground as she rushed toward the cave entrance. Kieran. He appeared in the firelight like an answer to her prayers, his amber eyes wild with relief as he caught sight of her. Luna threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest as he held her with desperate strength. I thought you weren't coming, she gasped between tears. I thought you'd changed your mind. Never, he said fiercely, his hands tangling in her hair. I've been searching for you all day. I heard about your exile from Pack Scouts. Word travels fast when an alpha's heir defects. Luna pulled back to look at him, noting the exhaustion etched in every line of his face, the way his clothes were torn and dirty from hours of tracking through dangerous territory. You shouldn't have come, she said, though her heart soared at his presence. Your pack will discover you're gone. They'll hunt you down just like mine would. Too late for that, Kieran said grimly. I confronted my father this morning. Told him about us, about the mate bond, about my intention to be with you regardless of pack law. Luna's blood ran cold. Kieran, no. What did he say? What you'd expect. That I was betraying everything the Ashford name stood for, that I was a disgrace to our bloodline, that no son of his would consort with Blackthorne scum. His jaw tightened with remembered pain. When I refused to renounce you, he gave me the same choice your father gave you. Exile or compliance. And you chose exile, Luna whispered. I chose you, he corrected, cupping her face in his hands. I chose love over hate, hope over fear, just like we talked about. Looking at him, this magnificent male who'd sacrificed everything for her just as she'd sacrificed everything for him, Luna felt something shift inside her chest. The doubts and regrets that had been tormenting her began to fade, replaced by a fierce determination to make their sacrifices meaningful. What do we do now? She asked. Kieran was quiet for a moment, his thumb stroking across her cheekbones with tender reverence. Now we prove that love is stronger than the hatred our families have been feeding for generations. Now we show the world that some bonds can't be broken by politics or tradition.
How?
A smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since their reunion. By doing something completely insane that will either get us killed or change everything. Luna felt an answering smile bloom across her own face despite everything they'd lost. I'm listening. The hunt moon ceremony is tonight, Kieran said, his voice gaining strength and conviction. Both our packs will be there, Nightfall to salvage what they can of the Steel Alliance, Crimson Moon to celebrate your disgrace and my exile. All the important families, all the political players who benefit from keeping our people divided. So, we crashed the party, Kieran said simply. We show up together, mated and bonded, and force them to confront what they've tried so hard to deny. We make them choose between continuing this pointless feud or accepting that the moon goddess herself has decreed an end to the hatred. Luna stared at him, her mind reeling from the audacity of his plan. That's not insane, it's suicidal. They'll kill us both on sight. Maybe. Or maybe they'll finally listen to reason. Kieran's eyes blazed with fierce determination. Luna, we're already dead to them. We're already outcasts, exiles, rogues with nothing left to lose. But we still have each other, and we still have the truth on our side. The truth that we're mates? The truth that their hatred is destroying innocent lives, Kieran said passionately. The truth that love is possible between our kinds, that peace could exist if they weren't so invested in maintaining old grudges. Luna, how many other potential mates have been separated by this feud? How many wolves have lived and died alone because their true partner happened to be born into the wrong pack? His words stirred something deep in Luna's chest, a wild hope she'd been afraid to acknowledge. What if he was right? What if their bond was meant to be more than just personal happiness? What if it was meant to heal wounds that had festered for centuries? Even if you're right about the bigger picture, Luna said slowly, showing up at the Hunt Moon ceremony is still a death sentence. Both packs have warriors there, security protocols, weapons. I know, Kieran interrupted. But Luna, I'd rather die fighting for something real than live the rest of my life regretting what we were too afraid to attempt. And maybe if we can reach just one person, if we can plant just one seed of doubt about the necessity of this hatred, it will be worth it. Luna looked into his amber eyes and saw her own desperate hope reflected there. They were talking about walking into certain death on the slimmest chance that love might triumph over generations of bloodshed. It was mad, impossible, the kind of romantic gesture that existed only in fairy tales. And yet, if we do this, she said quietly, if we really do this, there's no going back. Win or lose, live or die, we'll have played our only card. I know. Our families will never forgive us. Even if by some miracle we survive this, we'll still be outcasts. I know. And there's a very real chance that instead of healing anything, we'll just make the hatred worse. Our deaths could spark an all-out war that kills hundreds of innocent wolves. Kieran was quiet for a moment, and Luna could see him weighing the terrible possibilities against the slim hope they were chasing. Finally, he took her hands in his grip warm and steady. Luna, I can't promise that this will work. I can't even promise that we'll survive to see whether it works. But I can promise you this. If we don't try, if we let fear and doubt stop us from fighting for what we believe in, then our love will die anyway. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually the weight of all the things we didn't do, all the chances we didn't take, will crush whatever we're trying to build together. His words resonated through her like a bell tolling, clear and true and undeniable. Luna thought of her father's cold dismissal, of Jonathan Steele's possessive arrogance, of all the ways the current system ground individual happiness beneath the wheels of political necessity. Then she thought of the moment she'd first seen Kieran across that border clearing, of the recognition that had flared between them like divine fire, of the rightness she felt in his arms despite every law that said it was wrong. "When do we go?" she asked. Kieran's smile was brilliant as moonlight breaking through storm clouds. "The ceremony begins at midnight. If we're going to make an entrance, we might as well make it dramatic." Luna laughed despite herself, feeling lighter than she had since leaving Packlands that morning. "You realize we're probably about to die for love, right? People are going to write songs about how stupid we were." "Let them," Kieran said, pulling her close. "At least we'll die knowing we were brave enough to fight for something beautiful." As they held each other in the flickering firelight, Luna felt the last of her doubts melt away. Tomorrow she might be dead. Tomorrow, their grand gesture might be forgotten as just another tragedy in the long history of pack warfare. But tonight, she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the male who'd given up everything to be with her, preparing to risk their lives for the radical idea that love could conquer hatred. Some battles were worth fighting even when victories seemed impossible. Some truths were worth dying for even when no one wanted to hear them. And some loves were powerful enough to change the world, if the lovers were brave enough to let them.
Chapter 10.
The Hunt Moon ceremony was held in the ancient amphitheater that sat in neutral territory between the Nightfall and Crimson Moon Pack lands. For one night each month, old enmities were set aside as wolves from both packs gathered to honor the moon goddess and witness the sacred bonding of mates. Tonight, the air thrummed with tension that went far beyond the usual ceremonial excitement. Word of Luna's exile and Kieran's disappearance had spread through both territories, adding an undercurrent of scandal and speculation to what should have been a celebration of unity and new beginnings. From their hiding place in the forest surrounding the amphitheater, Luna and Kieran watched as hundreds of wolves took their seats in the carved stone bleachers. The Nightfall Pack claimed the eastern section, their dark ceremonial robes creating a somber block of shadow. The Crimson Moon Pack filled the western side, their red and gold attire bright as flame in the moonlight. Between them, in the position of honor reserved for visiting dignitaries, sat the delegation from the Steel Pack. Jonathan Steele himself occupied the central seat, his steel-gray eyes scanning the crowd with predatory interest. Luna's absence had clearly not deterred him from attending. If anything, he looked like a hunter scenting fresh prey. Second thoughts. Kieran murmured, his hand finding hers in the darkness. Luna squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from his presence. About a dozen. You? At least 20. He turned to face her, moonlight turning his amber eyes to molten gold. But I meant what I said earlier. I'd rather die trying than live wondering what might have been. They'd spent the last few hours preparing for what might be their final performance. Luna had braided her dark hair with wildflowers gathered from the neutral lands, a symbol of beauty growing freely beyond the constraints of pack politics. Kieran wore a simple white shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the wild grace of his movements. Together, they looked like what they were, young lovers who'd abandoned everything for each other. The ceremony began with the traditional invocations, pack elders from both sides offering prayers to the moon goddess and requesting her blessing on the night's proceedings. Luna's heart clenched as she spotted her father in the place of honor among the Nightfall delegation, his face carved from stone as he performed his ceremonial duties. Alpha Blackthorne, the Crimson Moon Elder, called out, following ancient protocol. Do you present any wolves from your pack seeking mates on this hunt moon? Alpha Blackthorne rose, his voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater. I do not. The wolf I had intended to present has proven unworthy of the honor. A ripple of whispers ran through the crowd at this public acknowledgement of Luna's disgrace. In the steel section, Jonathan's eyes narrowed with what might have been anger or amusement. Alpha Ashford, the Nightfall Elder, responded. Do you present any wolves from your pack seeking mates? Kieran's father stood, his face a mask of cold dignity that reminded Luna painfully of his son. I do not. The wolf I might have presented has chosen to disgrace our bloodline through association with our enemies. More whispers, louder now as the assembled wolves began to piece together the scandal. Luna felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger, but Kieran's steady presence beside her kept her grounded. The ceremony continued with other pack members being presented and the traditional hunt that would allow unmated wolves to seek their destined partners. But Luna could see the tension building, the way conversations kept returning to the absent pair who'd thrown both packs into chaos. It was Jonathan Steele who finally brought the elephant in the room into the open. Rising from his seat with fluid grace, he requested permission to address the assembly, a right granted to visiting dignitaries under ancient law. Brothers and sisters, he began, his voice carrying easily across the stone amphitheater. I come before you tonight not just as an ally, but as a wolf wronged by the actions of those who should have honored their commitments. Luna's hands clenched into fists as Steele continued his performance, painting himself as the victim of her selfish betrayal, and her father as a leader who'd lost control of his own heir. The crowd listened with rapt attention, many nodding along with his carefully crafted narrative of duty abandoned and honor besmirched. But I am not here seeking sympathy, Steele declared, his voice rising with righteous indignation. I am here to offer a solution. The Nightfall Pack has produced a defective heir, one whose weakness and disloyalty have compromised their ability to lead. I propose that the pack would benefit from new leadership. Leadership that understands the value of keeping commitments and honoring alliances. The implication was clear. Steele was making a play for Alpha Blackthorne's position, using Luna's exile as justification for a political coup. Luna watched her father's face darken with fury, saw the way his warriors shifted restlessly in their seats. "Enough," Kieran said quietly. "If we're going to do this, it has to be now." Luna nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs as they prepared to step out of the shadows and into the light. Whatever happened next, there would be no hiding, no retreat, no chance to change their minds. They emerged from the tree line hand in hand, walking with deliberate calm toward the amphitheater's central performance area. It took several moments for the crowd to notice them, two figures in simple clothes moving with the confidence of wolves who belonged exactly where they were. Then someone screamed. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Warriors from both packs leaped to their feet, hands moving to weapons. Alpha Blackthorne's face went white with shock and rage. Alpha Ashford looked like he'd been struck by lightning. But it was Jonathan Steele's reaction that surprised Luna the most. Instead of anger or outrage, his expression showed something that looked almost like satisfaction. As if their appearance was exactly what he'd been hoping for. "Stop," Luna called out, her voice trained from years of public speaking carrying clearly over the chaos. "We come under the ancient right of sanctuary. We claim the moon goddess's protection to speak truth before this assembly." The right of sanctuary was old, older than the pack system itself, dating back to the earliest wolf traditions. It granted any wolf the right to speak before a ceremonial gathering without fear of immediate violence, though it didn't protect them once they stopped talking. Alpha Blackthorne stepped forward, his face twisted with fury. "You have no rights here, Exile. You are nothing, no one. A rogue who deserves only death for your betrayal." "I am your daughter," Luna replied calmly, though her heart was racing. "I am the wolf you raised, trained, and taught to value truth above comfort. And I am here to tell you all a truth you desperately need to hear." She looked around the amphitheater, meeting as many eyes as she could, willing them to really see her instead of just the scandal she represented. Beside her, Kieran stood tall and proud, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of hostility surrounding them. "You call us traitors," Luna began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You call our love an abomination, a betrayal of everything our packs represent. But what has our hatred accomplished? What has 3 centuries of bloodshed and vengeance actually achieved?" "It has kept our bloodlines pure," Alpha Ashford snarled from his position among the Crimson Moon Wolves. "It has prevented the contamination that comes from mixing with inferior stock." "Inferior?" Kieran stepped forward, his voice cutting through the night air like a blade. "Father, look at her. Really look at her. Luna Blackthorne is brave, intelligent, honorable, everything you claim to value in a wolf. If she's inferior, then your values are meaningless." "She is Blackthorne filth," Alpha Ashford spat. "The daughter of the family that murdered your grandfather, that has shed Ashford blood for generations. How can you stand there and defend her?" "Because I love her," Kieran said simply, and the honesty in his voice was so pure it seemed to ring in the air like a bell. "Because the moon goddess herself chose her as my mate, and I refuse to believe that divine will is less important than human hatred." Luna felt tears prick at her eyes as she watched her mate face down his father's fury with quiet dignity. This was why she'd risked everything, not just for the love between them, but for the courage to stand up for what was right even when the whole world said it was wrong. "The moon goddess makes no mistakes," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent amphitheater. "If she bound an Ashford to a Blackthorne, it's because she sees something we've been too blind to recognize. Maybe she's trying to tell us that it's time to heal instead of hurt. Time to choose love over vengeance." "Pretty words," Jonathan Steele called out, his voice dripping with disdain. "But words won't change the fundamental truth that some wolves are meant to lead and others are meant to follow. Some bloodlines are strong and others are weak." He gestured toward Luna, with theatrical disgust. This female has proven her weakness by abandoning her duty for selfish desire. She is unfit to be anyone's mate, much less the mate of a pack leader's son. And yet, Kieran said, his voice dangerously quiet, she was brave enough to give up everything she'd ever known for love. She sacrificed her title, her family, her future security to be with me. How exactly does that make her weak? Because she chose emotion over logic, desire over duty, Steele replied smoothly. A strong leader makes hard choices, sacrifices personal happiness for the greater good. She couldn't even do that much. Luna felt something snap inside her as she listened to Steele's casual dismissal of everything she'd endured. The condescension, the reduction of her choices to mere weakness, the implication that love itself was a character flaw, it crystallized everything that was wrong with the system they were fighting against. "You want to talk about strength?" she said, stepping forward with predatory grace. "You want to discuss duty and sacrifice? Then let's discuss the duty of leaders to actually lead instead of just maintaining the status quo. Let's talk about the sacrifice of perpetuating hatred that serves no one except those who profit from division." She turned to address the entire assembly, her voice ringing with passionate conviction. "Look around you. Look at what our strength has accomplished. Generations of wolves who died for nothing more than old grudges. Families torn apart by loyalty to bloodlines instead of loyalty to each other. Young wolves forced into loveless bonds because political alliances matter more than personal happiness." A murmur ran through the crowd, not entirely hostile now, but thoughtful. Luna pressed her advantage, speaking directly to the hearts she hoped still existed beneath all the armor of tradition and expectation. "Kieran and I aren't asking you to abandon your principles," she continued. "We're asking you to examine them. We're asking you to consider whether principles that require the sacrifice of innocent happiness are really worth maintaining. We're asking you to imagine a world where wolves could love freely, where the moon goddess's choices were respected regardless of politics." "Enough." Alpha Blackthorne's voice cut through her speech like a whip crack. "You stand there spouting idealistic nonsense while real wolves deal with real consequences. Do you think love will protect our territories from raiders? Do you think pretty speeches will feed our families during harsh winters?" "No," Luna replied steadily. "But neither will pointless wars with our neighbors. Father, how many resources do we waste every year on border defenses that exist only because we refuse to consider peace? How many potential alliances do we lose because we're too proud to admit that our enemies might have something to offer?" She gestured toward the Crimson Moon section of the amphitheater. "Their pack has some of the finest trackers and healers in the region. Our pack has superior warriors and agricultural knowledge. Imagine what we could accomplish if we worked together instead of against each other." "Impossible," Alpha Ashford declared. "There is too much blood between us, too much history. Some wounds cannot be healed." "Can't they?" Kieran challenged. "Or do you just profit too much from keeping them open?" The accusation hung in the air like a lightning strike. Both alphas stiffened with outrage, but Luna noticed that neither immediately denied the charge. How much of their leadership, she wondered, depended on maintaining external enemies to distract from internal problems. It was then that Jonathan Steele made his move, rising from his seat with the fluid grace of a predator ready to strike. "This has gone on long enough," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. These two delusional children had disrupted a sacred ceremony with their romantic fantasies, but the real world requires real solutions. He stepped down from the bleachers, moving toward the center of the amphitheater with menacing purpose. "I invoke the right of challenge," he declared. "Single combat to settle this matter once and for all." Luna's blood ran cold. The right of challenge was ancient law, older even than sanctuary, but it was rarely invoked anymore. It allowed any wolf to demand single combat to settle disputes that couldn't be resolved through normal means. "I challenge the male," Steele continued, his steel-gray eyes fixed on Kieran with predatory intensity. "If he wins, I'll withdraw my claims and accept their bond as legitimate. If I win—" He smiled, cold and sharp as a blade. The female becomes my mate as originally arranged, and order is restored. A collective intake of breath swept through the amphitheater. The challenge was legal, binding, and absolutely ruthless. Steel was gambling that his superior size and experience would allow him to eliminate Kieran and claim Luna through right of conquest. I accept, Kieran said without hesitation, though Luna could see the fear flickering in his amber eyes. No. Luna stepped between them, her heart racing with panic. This is insane. Kieran, he's been training for war his entire life. He's older, stronger. He's also arrogant, Kieran said quietly, his hands settling on her shoulders. And he's fighting for possession while I'm fighting for love. That has to count for something. Luna stared into his eyes and saw her own fear reflected there, mixed with a determination that took her breath away. He knew the odds were against him. He knew he might be walking toward his death. And he was going to do it anyway because it was the only chance they had left. Some battles are worth any risk, he whispered, echoing the words they'd shared in the cave. And some loves are worth any price, she whispered back, her voice breaking on the words. As the crowd began to form a circle for the challenge, as warriors from both packs prepared to witness a combat that would determine not just Luna's fate, but possibly the future of both bloodlines, she realized that everything they'd fought for now came down to this single, desperate gamble. Win or lose, live or die. Their story would end here beneath the Hunt Moon's silver light. The only question was whether it would end in triumph or tragedy. Chapter 11. The ancient amphitheater fell silent as the two males circled each other in the moonlit arena. Centuries of tradition and protocol governed every aspect of the challenge. No weapons except natural abilities, no outside interference until one wolf yielded or died, and absolute acceptance of the outcome by all present. Jonathan Steele moved with the calculated precision of a born predator, his steel-gray eyes never leaving Kieran as he assessed his opponent's strengths and weaknesses. He was larger, more experienced in formal combat, and carried himself with the arrogant confidence of someone who'd never truly been tested. Kieran, by contrast, fought like the wild thing he'd become, all fluid grace and desperate determination. He might be younger and less formally trained, but he possessed something Steele lacked. Everything to lose and nothing left to hold back. Last chance to reconsider, boy, Steele called out as they continued their deadly dance. Yield now, and I'll make sure your death is quick. The only thing I'll yield is your corpse to the moon goddess, Kieran replied, his voice steady despite the fear Luna could smell rolling off him in waves. Luna stood at the edge of the combat circle, her hands clenched so tightly her nails drew blood from her palms. Around her, hundreds of wolves watched in tense silence as their future was decided by two males fighting over her like a prize to be won. The injustice of it made her sick. After everything she and Kieran had said about choice and love and breaking old patterns, here they were perpetuating the oldest pattern of all, violence between males to determine a female's fate. But she also understood the deeper truth beneath the barbaric spectacle. This wasn't really about her, or even about their individual love story. This was about two completely different philosophies of how wolves should live. Steele's world of rigid hierarchy and political calculation against Kieran's vision of freedom and emotional truth. The first attack came without warning. Steele lunged forward with blinding speed, his partial shift lending superhuman strength to the blow aimed at Kieran's throat. But Kieran had been expecting it, rolling aside at the last second and letting Steele's momentum carry him past. Too slow, old man, Kieran taunted, though Luna could see the slight tremor in his hands that betrayed his nerves. Steele snarled, his canines extending as his wolf pressed closer to the surface. Let's see how cocky you are when you're bleeding out in the dirt. What followed was a brutal ballet of violence and skill. Steele attacked with the systematic efficiency of a trained killer, each move calculated to inflict maximum damage. Kieran countered with wild creativity, using speed and unpredictability to avoid the worst of his opponent's assault while landing quick strikes of his own. For several minutes, it seemed almost evenly matched. Then Steele's superior experience began to tell. A vicious combination left Kieran staggered and bleeding from several deep gashes, his left arm hanging uselessly at his side. "You're outmatched, boy," Steele said, circling his wounded prey like a shark scenting blood. "Your little girlfriend will be much more compliant once she's seen what happens to males who disappoint her." The taunt was clearly designed to make Kieran lose control, to let anger override strategy. And it almost worked. Luna saw the flash of rage in her mate's amber eyes, the way his muscles tensed for a reckless charge that would likely be his last. But then Kieran's gaze found hers across the combat circle, and something passed between them that was deeper than words. Love, yes, but also faith. Faith that their bond was strong enough to overcome any obstacle, that their love was worth any sacrifice. "You're right," Kieran said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed amphitheater. "I am outmatched. You're stronger, faster, more skilled than I'll ever be." Steele's eyes narrowed suspiciously, sensing a trap. "But you know what you're not?" Kieran continued, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth despite the blood running down his face. "You're not her mate. You're not the wolf the moon goddess chose for her. And you never will be, no matter how many battles you win." The words hit their target more effectively than any physical blow could have. Steele's face contorted with fury, his careful strategy abandoned in favor of raw aggression. He launched himself at Kieran with a roar of rage, his partial shift complete as claws and fangs sought to end the fight once and for all. It was exactly what Kieran had been waiting for. As Steele committed fully to his attack, Kieran dropped low and rolled forward, coming up behind his opponent with liquid grace. Before Steele could turn, Kieran's arm locked around his throat in a chokehold that cut off both air and blood flow to the brain. "Yield," Kieran gasped, his own wounds making the hold difficult to maintain. "Yield, and this ends now." For a moment, it seemed like Steele might actually submit. His struggles grew weaker, his face turning purple as oxygen deprivation took its toll. Then, with a desperation born of impending defeat, he drove his elbow back into Kieran's injured ribs. Kieran's hold loosened just enough for Steele to break free, spinning around with a backhanded blow that sent the younger male sprawling. Blood poured from a gash on Kieran's temple, and Luna could see him struggling to focus as Steele stalked toward him for the killing blow. "No more games," Steele snarled, his claws extending to their full deadly length. "Time to end this farce." He raised his hand for the strike that would tear out Kieran's throat, and froze as a new voice cut through the night air like a blade. "Enough." Every head turned toward the source of the interruption. Alpha Blackthorne stood at the edge of the combat circle, his face carved from stone as he surveyed the scene before him. "Father, you can't interfere," Luna said desperately. "The challenge laws." "I'm not interfering with the challenge," her father said quietly. "I'm ending it. As the wronged party in this dispute, I have the right to call for cessation of hostilities." Steele straightened, his face twisted with confusion and rage. "You can't be serious. I was about to end this permanently." "Were you?" Alpha Blackthorne stepped into the circle, his presence commanding the attention of every wolf present. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you were about to murder a barely conscious opponent. Not exactly the behavior of an honorable warrior." "He's Ashford scum," Steele spat. "He deserves whatever he gets." "Does he?" "Well." Alpha Blackthorne moved to where Kieran lay bleeding in the dirt, crouching down beside the young male who'd risked everything for love. "Tell me, boy, if you could do it all over again, would you still choose my daughter over your duty to your pack?" Kieran struggled to sit up, his amber eyes clear despite his injuries. "Every time," he said without hesitation. "She's worth more than duty, more than honor, more than my own life." Alpha Blackthorne was quiet for a long moment, studying the young Ashford male who spoke of love with such conviction. Finally, he stood and turned to face the assembled crowd. 30 years ago," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater, "I mated with my wife not because I loved her, but because the alliance between our families was politically advantageous. She was a good woman, a loyal mate, but we never shared the kind of bond that makes life truly meaningful." Luna's breath caught in her throat. Her father had never spoken publicly about her mother, who died when Luna was barely 12. I told myself that love was a luxury leaders couldn't afford, Alpha Blackthorne continued. That duty and stability mattered more than personal happiness. And maybe I was right. Our alliance did strengthen both packs, did provide security for our people. He looked directly at Luna, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never expected to see: regret. But I also spent 20 years watching my mate smile politely and perform her role while her heart belonged to another. I spent 20 years knowing that my children grew up in a house where duty was paramount and love was secondary. And I've spent the last 8 years wondering if maybe, just maybe, I'd chosen the wrong path. A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Alpha Ashford had risen from his seat, his face pale with what might have been recognition or fear. "James," he said quietly, using Alpha Blackthorne's first name for the first time in decades. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe our children are braver than we are, Marcus." Alpha Blackthorne turned to face his longtime enemy. "I'm saying that maybe they found something we threw away in the name of pride and politics." He gestured toward Luna and Kieran, who had somehow found each other despite their wounds and were now supporting each other as they faced the judgment of their people. "Look at them," he said simply. "Really look at them. They've given up everything: family, fortune, security, status, for each other. They've risked their lives rather than accept a world where love takes second place to convenience. When was the last time any of us showed that kind of courage?" "They're fools," Jonathan Steele snarled, though Luna noticed he hadn't moved to finish what his challenge had started. "Naive children who don't understand how the real world works." "Are they?" Alpha Blackthorne asked. "Or are they the only ones in this amphitheater who understand what really matters?" He looked around at the assembled wolves, hundreds of people who'd spent generations accepting that hatred was natural, that old wounds could never heal, that individual happiness was less important than collective stability. "Marcus," he said, addressing his counterpart directly, "your son risked everything for my daughter. My daughter sacrificed everything for your son. The moon goddess herself has declared them mates. What more proof do we need that it's time to choose healing over hatred?" Alpha Ashford stood frozen in his place among the Crimson Moon delegation, his face cycling through emotions too complex to name. Luna held her breath, knowing that everything, absolutely everything, depended on what happened next. Finally, slowly, the Ashford patriarch began to walk down from the bleachers toward the combat circle. The crowd parted before him like water, everyone sensing that they were witnessing a moment that would define their future. He stopped in front of Kieran and Luna, studying them with the same intensity his son had inherited. Luna felt her heart hammering as she waited for judgment from the male who'd raised Kieran to hate everything she represented. "You love my son," Alpha Ashford said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "With all my heart," Luna replied steadily. "And you love his daughter," he said to Kieran. "More than life itself," Kieran confirmed. Alpha Ashford nodded slowly, as if weighing their words against some internal scale. Then, to everyone's shock, he knelt in the dirt beside his wounded son. "Kieran," he said softly, "I failed you. I raised you to hate instead of teaching you to love. I let old grudges poison your childhood instead of showing you how to build something better." Tears were flowing freely down Kieran's face as he looked at his father, really looked at him, for perhaps the first time in years. "Father." "Let me finish," Alpha Ashford said gently. "I'm proud of you, son. Proud that you were brave enough to choose love over loyalty to my mistakes. Proud that you found something worth risking everything to protect." He looked up at Luna, and she saw recognition in his eyes, not of an enemy, but of the female who'd given his son a reason to live. "I was wrong," he said simply. "We were all wrong. And if you'll have us, if you'll give us a chance to do better, maybe we can build the kind of world where love doesn't have to be forbidden." The silence that followed was profound and transformative. Luna felt something shift in the very air around them, as if the moon goddess herself was smiling down on this moment of healing and hope. Then Jonathan Steele's voice cut through the peace like a knife. "This is insane," he snarled, his face twisted with fury and disbelief.
"You're all insane."
"You would throw away centuries of tradition, compromise your pack's security, endanger your bloodlines. All for what? Some romantic fairy tale that will fall apart the moment reality sets in." He gestured wildly at the crowd, his voice rising to near hysteria. "These two children have manipulated you with pretty speeches and dramatic gestures, but love doesn't feed hungry families. Love doesn't protect territory from raiders. Love doesn't. Love," came a new voice from the crowd, clear and strong, "is the only thing that makes any of the rest worth fighting for." Luna's heart leaped as she recognized the speaker. Sarah stood in the Nightfall section, her red hair gleaming in the moonlight as she addressed the assembly with quiet confidence. "My sister is the bravest person I know," Sarah continued, stepping down from the bleachers to join the group in the combat circle. "She could have had an easy life, a comfortable marriage, all the security anyone could want. Instead, she chose to fight for something real, something true, something that makes life worth living." She looked directly at Alpha Blackthorne, her green eyes blazing with determination. "Father, Luna taught me what courage looks like. She showed me that some things are worth any risk, any sacrifice. If you exile her permanently for following her heart, then you'll have to exile me too, because I won't live in a world where love is treated as a crime." "Sarah, no," Luna gasped, but her sister just smiled. "Sisters stand together," she said simply. "Whatever comes next, we face it as family." And then, as if a dam had burst, other voices began to speak up from the crowd. Young wolves mostly, but some elders too, sharing their own stories of loves lost to politics, of mates chosen for them instead of by them, of years spent wondering what might have been if they'd been brave enough to follow their hearts. Jonathan Steele watched the rebellion growing around him with increasing desperation, his carefully laid plans crumbling as the crowd embraced the radical idea that love might actually be more important than power. "You'll regret this," he said finally, his voice cold with promise. "All of you. When your packs are weak and divided, when your enemies take advantage of your softness, when your children pay the price for your foolishness, you'll remember this night and wish you'd chosen strength over sentiment." "Maybe," Alpha Blackthorne said calmly. "But I'd rather risk failure trying to build something beautiful than guarantee success maintaining something ugly." Steele's face contorted with rage, but before he could respond, his own warriors were approaching him with carefully neutral expressions. "Sir," one of them said quietly, "perhaps it's time to return to our territory. This alliance clearly isn't going to work out as planned." As the Steele delegation gathered itself for departure, Jonathan's steel-gray eyes found Luna one last time. The promise of future retribution in his gaze was unmistakable, but Luna found she wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she and Kieran would face them together. "This isn't over," Steele said quietly as he passed them. "Yes, it is," Kieran replied, struggling to his feet with Luna's help. "Your way is over. Our way is just beginning." As the steel wolves disappeared into the forest, the remaining crowd began to buzz, with excited conversation about what this night meant, what changes might be coming, what kind of world they might build together. But Luna only had eyes for the family gathering around her, her father, who'd found the courage to choose love over duty, Alpha Ashford, who'd put healing above hatred, Sarah, who'd risked everything to stand with her sister, and Kieran, her mate, her heart, her partner in the beautiful madness of trying to change the world through love. Some battles, she realized, weren't won through violence, but through the courage to imagine something better. Some victories weren't about defeating enemies, but about transforming them into friends. And some loves weren't just personal, they were revolutionary, powerful enough to heal wounds that had festered for generations and build bridges where once there had been only walls. The Hunt Moon ceremony was supposed to be about finding mates and celebrating new beginnings. As Luna looked around at the two packs beginning to mingle, at former enemies sharing stories and discovering common ground, she realized they'd accomplished something far more important. They'd planted the seeds of a new world. Now all they had to do was tend them carefully and pray they'd grow into something beautiful enough to justify all the risks they'd taken to plant them.
Chapter 12.
1 year later, Luna Blackthorne Ashford stood at the edge of the very clearing where she'd first met her mate, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The border markers between the Nightfall and Crimson Moon territories had been removed months ago, replaced by shared patrol routes and joint training exercises that would have been unimaginable just a year earlier. The merger hadn't been without its challenges. There had been resistance from traditionalists on both sides, logistical nightmares as two separate pack hierarchies learned to function as one, and more than a few heated arguments about everything from hunting protocols to mating ceremonies. But gradually, slowly, the unified pack had begun to find its rhythm. Brooding again? Kieran's voice came from behind her, warm with affection and gentle teasing. Luna smiled without turning around. Reflecting, there's a difference. His arms came around her waist, pulling her back against his chest as he nuzzled the mark on her throat. The mating bite he'd given her 6 months ago in a ceremony that had celebrated not just their union, but the official merger of their packs. Anything in particular you're reflecting on? Luna leaned into his warmth, marveling at how natural it still felt to be held by him. Some days she had to remind herself that their happiness was real, that they'd actually survived the chaos of that night at the Hunt Moon ceremony and built something lasting from the ruins of old hatred. "Sarah's pregnant," she said simply. Kieran went still behind her. "Really? With who? Oh, Marcus." Luna nodded, unable to suppress a smile at the memory of her sister's shy announcement that morning. The romance between Sarah and Marcus had been one of the unexpected developments of the pack merger, the loyal beta falling head over heels for the spirited younger Blackthorne sister who challenged him at every turn. 3 months along, apparently. She wanted to be sure before she told anyone. "That's wonderful news," Kieran said, and Luna could hear the genuine happiness in his voice. "Marcus has been walking around with a stupid grin for weeks. Now I know why." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thoughts about the future taking shape around them. The unified pack was thriving in ways neither side had anticipated. Combining the Blackthorne agricultural expertise with Ashford tracking abilities had led to unprecedented prosperity, while joint defensive strategies had made their territory one of the most secure in the region. "There's something else," Luna said eventually. "Good news or complicated news?" "Both, I think." She turned in his arms, looking up into the amber eyes that still made her heart skip beats. "Father and Alpha Ashford, I mean Marcus's father, have been talking about expansion. Not conquest," she added quickly, seeing his expression. "Partnership. There are 3 smaller packs to the north who've been struggling with rogue attacks. Our joint council thinks we could offer them protection in exchange for alliance agreements." Kieran whistled softly. From bitter enemies to regional power brokers in less than a year. That's actually pretty impressive. "It's also potentially dangerous," Luna warned. "Not all packs are going to be happy about our success. There are already rumors that some of the more traditional leaders see us as a threat to the established order." "Let them," Kieran said with a shrug that didn't quite hide his concern. "We've proven that cooperation works better than conflict. If other packs want to maintain the old ways, that's their choice, but they can't force us back into patterns that nearly destroyed our people." Luna nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. Change always came with a price, and the radical transformation they'd sparked was bound to create enemies as well as allies. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight was about celebrating how far they'd come. "Ready?" Kieran asked, checking the position of the rising moon. Luna took a deep breath, smoothing down the flowing white dress that had belonged to her mother. Tonight was their first anniversary, and they'd decided to celebrate it in the place where their love story had begun, the border clearing that had once divided their peoples and now served as the heart of their unified territory. "Ready," she confirmed. They walked hand in hand through the forest paths that had become as familiar as their own heartbeats, passing landmarks that marked the journey from forbidden love to accepted partnership. The old watchtower, where Luna used to keep vigil, now housed a school where young wolves from both bloodlines learned together. The training grounds where Ashford and Blackthorne warriors had once faced each other in deadly combat now echoed with the sounds of cooperative exercises. When they reached the clearing, Luna gasped in delight. Hundreds of small lanterns had been strung through the trees, creating a canopy of warm light that turned the space into something magical. Tables laden with food from both pack traditions filled one side of the space, while musicians tuned instruments that would play the ancient songs both people shared. But it was the crowd that truly took her breath away. Wolves from the unified pack mingled freely, former enemies now sharing stories and laughter as their children played together in the moonlight. She spotted her father deep in conversation with Alpha Ashford, Marcus. She corrected herself, though the older wolves still sometimes forgot to use first names. Sarah glowed with early pregnancy as she and Marcus danced to music that blended Blackthorne melodies with Ashford rhythms. Surprised? Kieran asked, though his grin suggested he already knew the answer. "How did you organize all this without me knowing?" "I had help," he admitted. Turns out that planning anniversary parties is one of the many areas where cooperation works better than individual effort. As if summoned by his words, Sarah appeared at Luna's side, practically bouncing with excitement. "Do you like it? We've been planning for weeks. Even the weather cooperated. Look at that moon." Luna looked up to see the full moon rising above the tree line, its silver light adding to the magical atmosphere of the celebration. A year ago, she'd stood in this same clearing as an exile, risking everything for love. Now she stood here as the co-leader of a unified pack, surrounded by family and friends who'd chosen hope over hatred. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it completely. The evening that followed was everything Luna could have hoped for, and more. There were speeches about unity and cooperation, toasts to new beginnings and old friendships, and dancing that continued long into the night. But the moment that stayed with her was quiet and private, when she and Kieran slipped away from the crowd to stand alone in the center of the clearing where they'd first recognized each other. "Any regrets?" Kieran asked, his voice soft in the moonlight. Luna considered the question seriously. A year ago, she'd been the heir to an ancient bloodline with a secure future mapped out before her. Now she was co-leader of an experimental pack merger that could collapse at any moment, married to a former enemy, facing challenges that had no precedent in pack history. "None," she said firmly. "Even if it all falls apart tomorrow, even if we lose everything we've built, I'd still choose this. I'd still choose you." "Good," Kieran said, pulling her close. "Because I have something for you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box that made Luna's heart skip. "Kieran, we're already mated." "I know. But I wanted to give you something that belonged to neither of our families, something that represented just us and the future we're building together." He opened the box to reveal a ring unlike anything Luna had ever seen. The band was crafted from two different metals, silver and gold, twisted together in an intricate pattern that seemed to shift and flow in the moonlight. At its center sat a stone that appeared to be two gems fused into one, clear crystal shot through with veins of deep blue and forest green. "It's a harmony stone," Kieran explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "The jeweler said it only forms when two different types of crystal grow together under perfect conditions. Like us." Tears blurred Luna's vision as she looked down at the ring that somehow captured everything they'd fought for. Two different elements creating something stronger and more beautiful together than either could be alone. "I love you," she whispered, the words carrying all the weight of everything they'd overcome to be here. "I love you too," Kieran replied, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of moonlight and forever. As they held each other in the clearing that had witnessed their first meeting, their first kiss, and now this anniversary celebration, Luna felt something settle deep in her chest. Not contentment exactly, but a profound sense of rightness, of being exactly where she belonged with exactly the right person. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, enemies to face, problems to solve that no one had ever dealt with before. The unified pack was still an experiment, their leadership still untested in many ways. But they would face it all together, she and Kieran, the former enemies who'd chosen love over hatred and built something revolutionary from the ashes of ancient feuds. Their children would grow up in a world where pack loyalty didn't have to mean pack hatred, where the moon goddess's choices were respected regardless of politics, where love was seen as a strength rather than a weakness. Some loves, Luna reflected as she danced with her mate under the silver moon, really were powerful enough to change the world. They just required people brave enough to let them. The hunt moon rose higher, casting its blessing over the celebration below. And in its ancient light, two packs that had been enemies for centuries continued their transformation into something new, something hopeful, something worth all the risks they'd taken to create it. The age of forbidden love was ending. The age of chosen family was just beginning. And Luna Blackthorne Ashford, former Exile and current co-alpha of the most radical pack merger in recent history, danced on with her impossible mate, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Some fairy tales, after all, were meant to be true.
The end.